to acknowledge our past elders and respect to all our present elders as they hold the knowledge, the wisdom and the stories to share. And you learn the Habala tribe. My skin, it belongs to two tribes. The Yagawai, this side of the Brisbane River, and the Turrbal, across the river, which I will show my respects, who lived and took care of this part of Mother Earth for many, many thousands of years. As we all know, Aboriginal culture is the oldest living culture in the world, and our people, we give praise to our Creator, who placed our ancestors in this beautiful land, which was named Australia, gave them their culture. That culture, it has been taught and handed down from generation to generation for over 60,000 years.
I've had a good life, but it's awakened my heart in the last 2 years to realise why our families are so down and out sometimes and they feel like they don't belong. It's because we've never been recognised as a single identity here in Australia. South Sea Island people, you need to stand up and be counted. Who cares if you've got Aboriginal blood in you? Who cares you've got Kiwi blood in you? You still got that background of slavery in your family. You know? Stand up and be counted. I honour you all and I thank God for you all. And I'm praying for a positive outcome this weekend. Thank you too much.
Today we're here for this conference, and it's a conference that's to do with everybody, not just a few people. We got to all work together and make things work. Think carefully who we put on that committee that's going to work for our people and for the betterment of our children. We need to do that, especially for the younger generation that's coming up.
When my people, life is all, we may not be here this year. Fight for me will be no more. Days was to me. You let it be, oh Lord, you let it be.
All those Australian South Sea Islander leaders who've laid the foundation for what we build on today. I'd like to acknowledge all of you in the room and those past and present. We can't do this without you, and it's great that we're here to initiate and start the much needed conversations in moving forward in setting up a national representative body.
We not only have to work together for a national body, to work with government, but we need to truly understand that our forefathers and what's been done before us, they didn't have a voice, and we are that voice today. But we need to come to that understanding, our culture and our protocol. We have families here sitting here. I've heard many stories from them. This is not a story. This is our history. These are our people. So if I can encourage you today, everyone here has a story. We are not divided by lines on a map because we all share that one commonality. It's our history. So today, please, families, I encourage each of you, let us truly know the identity of who our people are and the strength in which they stood and fought for us to be standing here in this big flash auditorium.
This forum is indeed important as 2013 marks the 150th anniversary of the arrival of indentured labourers from the South Sea Islands to Australia. It is time to remember the stories and the suffering of the South Sea Islanders were blackbirded to Australia. As those of you here today know, from 1863 to 1904, over 55,000 South Sea Islanders from more than 80 Pacific islands, including Vanuatu, the Solomon Islands, New Caledonia, Papua New Guinea, Kiribati and Tuvalu, were brought to Australia. In the early 1900s, many South Sea Islanders were deported, and those who stayed in Australia were subjected to discrimination. The anniversary is also a time to recognise South Sea Islanders' culture and history, and to pay tribute to the very significant contribution they have made to our nation. The Wantok 2013 National Forum provides a chance for the broader community to learn more about Australian South Sea Islanders and their history. The Commonwealth Government is funding to support this forum and other capacity building workshops as an important part of helping to build understanding of the Australian South Sea Islander community. On behalf of the Coalition Government, thank you for inviting the Prime Minister to join you at this Wantok 2013 National Forum. I offer my best wishes and the best wishes of all Australian people for your forum this year, and I'm sure you're all looking forward to the presentations and discussions ahead. So my best wishes for a very successful conference and forum. Thank you.
Your story is unique because you do not have a true immigration heritage. It is through a very tragic circumstance that many of your ancestors came to this place, and we do acknowledge that. There is still significant hurt which lingers as a result of the trade of luring or kidnapping the South Sea Islander people, which was known as blackbirding. The White Australia policies later on also added another chapter of hardship when people were further displaced from the families that they had created here.
I acknowledge that people, no doubt, would have come from long distances and probably at some cost, but those people are the leaders of the Australian South Sea Islander communities, and your deliberations here over the next few days will certainly, hopefully, bear fruit in the way that you advocate on behalf of the Australian South Sea Islands with all levels of government going forward. Thanks very much.
The Department of Immigration and Border Protection is pleased to offer support through the Diversity and Social Cohesion Program. This program provides up to $50,000 of funding for not-for-profit groups to run projects which will promote fairness, respect and a sense of belonging for all community members, and aims to address cultural diversity and capacity building. These events are an opportunity to celebrate your rich culture. Sharing your history and personal stories with each other and the broader community is a chance to both reflect on the contribution your community has made to Australia's culturally diverse society and also further strengthen your identity as a community.
I'm here on behalf of the Government of Vanuatu and the Prime Minister of Vanuatu, who couldn't come. He was invited and asked me to give his apologies. The Vanuatu Government's very much looking forward to the outcomes of this meeting. We have a lot of communities in Vanuatu who've been coming over here for decades, and of course family members here coming over to Vanuatu for a long, long time. The government is wanting to strengthen the relationships our communities have, take advantage of the opportunities that are coming up, that are there for our people, both in Vanuatu and in Australia. And the government, to support our community connections, needs to have a national voice for South Sea Islanders in Australia. We can talk with the Australian government, we can talk with the State Government of Queensland, we can talk with Brisbane City Hall, but we need to be able to talk to somebody that represents Australian South Sea Islanders to at the same table with the governments. We very much would like to see this three-way or four-way with the Solomon Islands government and so on become something that evolves out of these kinds of what happens here and what will be coming in the programs of the new national body.
2001, we know that the 2001 Action Plan was introduced. It contained 5 main points. The first point had to do with South Sea Islanders gaining better access to government services. The second was for government services themselves to obtain a better understanding of the issues that affect and impact Australian South Sea Islanders. The third was to do with building infrastructure so that we may better aid and abet the social inclusion status of the people. The fourth and the fifth is what's known as conjunctive. That means you can't have one without the other, based on combating prejudice and effectively dealing with discrimination. 13 years later, from a grassroots perspective, let me give it to you direct. The 2000 recognition statement and 2001 action plan was a good proclamation, but poor demonstration. I would say to the government, I did read what you had to state, but in reality, what did you demonstrate? You see, folks, we cannot move forward with any new form of work or activity as a national body unless we take care of old business. We cannot expect to encourage our youth, which is what's been happening across the nation, to pick up and run with the mandate of what it is that we want to do for our people if we show them that we are prepared to hold the government accountable for commitments that they have made to us. We now have over 250 individuals who are non-Australian South Sea Islanders who can attest to the fact that the government has been negligent in forthcomingly bringing to fruition the commitments that it has made to us as people. And I want to ask you, what are we prepared to do about that? Because see, at the end of the day, brothers and sisters, whether you want to admit this or not, you're going to leave an inheritance. And the inheritance is that when you pass from this time, what are you leaving behind for your next generation to pick up and to run with? I say, while we have an opportunity to do something about what that inheritance is, let's act, and let's act now. Let's act in unity, let's act in strength. If I was to say to you that there are 5 people standing up at this platform, and then there's me, and I would say to you, what is the greater number, 5 or 1? The answer will always be 1. One voice, one accord, one unity. I'll tell you something, brothers, I'm going to close with this, because I've got a Pentecostal background. I could speak for hours. When I look at the government's commitment in the 2000 recognition statement and the accompanying 2001 action plan, I say this, it wasn't incorrect. And whilst it wasn't incorrect, it was incomplete. You see, the government, they took our issue and they decided to set policies and an action plan with our issues, but they left the people over here. You see, you can't separate the issues from the people because the people are the issues. One thing I'd say to the government of this day is come work with us. Come form partnerships with us. Come invest in our cultural and intellectual property. I would say this, in a couple of days' time, as a nation, we stop to watch the Melbourne Cup. They say it's a race that stops a nation. Well, let me finish on a little punter's turn. Government, come and invest in us. Come and take a punt on us. You will get good returns because we're good things. Bless God, we are specials. Don't ever forget your humble beginnings, brothers and sisters, because that's our strength.
15,000 died in Queensland. 15,000. That's about 30, it depends how you calculate it, but it's 25 to 30% of the people that came here died here. They never went home. The government knew the extent of those death rates, and they didn't stop it. They just kept using the labour. one thing that comes out of this, of course, is that the Queensland Government set up a fund called the Pacific Islanders Fund, which was to look after the wages of deceased islanders and supposedly send them back to families in the islands. They didn't. They sent back they used about 16% of that money, and the rest of it they kept for administrative purposes. And in the end, the Commonwealth Government used that money for the deportation in 1906, 1908. So the wages of the dead paid for the White Australia policy.
Doesn't matter what government's in power, when you're going for reparation, and if they see the same cohort fighting amongst each other, let me tell you what they're going to say. Don't give them black fellas any money. They can't even come together in a small meeting. When I was in the Caribbean teaching, after working with the Black Panthers, I taught on the Marcus Garvey philosophy and about slavery. And those deadly brothers and sisters over there said, what about the slavery in your country with the South Sea Islanders? They said, are they ready for reparation? I said, well, at the moment they're not. I'm talking about 35 years ago here. There's a large percentage are born-again Christians, and I love all them born-agains. They pep me up. But once, in those days, you weren't allowed to talk about your culture, you weren't allowed to talk about injustice, you weren't allowed to talk about slavery, and definitely not reparation, like all the other colonised countries. Those people in Jamaica and those issues of slavery, they're going to governments for billions and billions of dollars. When you start talking about the impact of colonisation, where many of our women were raped, many of our children had their heads kicked off live, the stories are horrendous, my brothers and sisters. And I come here, and today I hear there's a big division. They don't have an affirmative action strategy in this country for black fellas. They don't have a treaty or a Bill of Rights. We all got to come together. And as I said to my sister Imelda, if you don't get on this board, one door shuts, 10 opens. You've been working 24 hours a day, my sister. And I'm sorry to the brothers and sisters, if you haven't been told about the meetings, $50,000 is a pittance in the open, in the ocean. We should be getting $50 billion. For this country was built on slavery, on Aboriginal, Torres Strait and South Sea Islander slavery. And until we come together, we aren't going to get justice. What a mully, everybody, and God bless.
It's been said often today, reference has been made to the 67 islanders who came on the Don Juan. And I've even written that myself in something I've published, 67 islanders arrived. Well, 67 certainly came from Tanna, from Mbate, from Lipu and from Mare, but only 66 got off. One unnamed islander died on the morning of the 17th of August, 1863. And so my suggestion, and it's a suggestion of course coming from an outsider, is that when you commemorate that event, you're also commemorating that unnamed but not unknown islander. Thanks.
South Sea Islanders played an incredible, or made an incredible contribution to the development of the unique culture, the island custom that exists in Torres Strait today. I'm sure you all know that. They comprised almost the entire workforce of the early pearling industry in the first few years. Shortly after that began in the late 1860s, they were the missionaries who came to Torres Strait. The most important event in the Torres Strait calendar is the Coming to the Light on 1st of July, celebrates the London Missionary Society's arrival in Torres Strait. There were white missionaries there, but they didn't do the work of evangelisation. You know, it was left to those Loyalty Islander, initially Loyalty Islander teachers, as they were called, to do that work. Later they were followed by Rarotongans and Niueans and Samoans. But they carried that on for over 50 years, and they're responsible in a way. If you listen, or if you listen to Pastor Dave Passy from Torres Strait speak, and many others, they will say that the Torres Strait Islanders were prepared of the Lord. When they explain to themselves how quickly they were converted to Christianity, and it did really happen very quickly, they were prepared of the Lord. But you really do have to give a lot of credit to those early South Sea Islander missionaries who did all that early work. As Torres Strait went on, the proportion of South Sea Islanders in the maritime industry compared to the overall workforce went down. So you had about 500 working in Torres Strait in 1872. By the middle of the 1880s, it was probably down to 200. By the turn of the century, it was still about 200. When the expatriation happened, when people were taken out of the country in 1906, they looked for islanders to expatriate from Torres Strait. About 150 stayed behind. I don't really know how many left. And I guess that's the one thing I want to say and that I'll leave you with. We don't have the same kind of figures for the maritime industries that you have for the people who worked in the agricultural industries. They didn't come in under the 1868 or any of those other acts. They were signed on ships' articles or masters and servants contracts in the same way as other sailors. And so the figures for them are hard to determine. 150 officially were allowed to stay, but that's by 1906. By then there's a whole generation of islanders who have been living on the islands, married into islander communities. And ever since they've played an incredible part in the life of Torres Strait. But it's a complicated story. A lot of those islanders aren't Melanesians, they're Polynesians, there's Samoans, there's a large body of Rarotongans. In 1900, when you had 200 Melanesians, that is Ni Vanuatu, people from the Solomons, still working in Torres Strait, there were 45 to 50 Rarotongans. Not Rarotongans, Rotumans. And then on top of that you had Samoans, and then you had other peoples as well. So it's a very complicated story. I'm here mainly to answer questions that people might have about any of that. I'm happy to do that in the break, and I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
And just to remind us too, a lot of our people fought in all the world wars. My grandfather, his name was James Lingudok, and he was in the 11th Light Horse who liberated Palestine. So I'm very proud of my military heritage as well, and I know that many of you have got those military histories there too.
Nothing really prepares you for the experience when you go back. People tell you stories and you have this vision in your head, but until you actually experience it, it's nothing like what you expect it's going to be. And connecting with family members and watching genealogy being discussed for 3 days right in front of your eyes is probably an experience I'll never forget, and a real privilege to have unfold in front of you. And a good opportunity away from technology just to listen and learn. It was also during this time that I realised the impact of growing up in Australia and its benefits. While in the village I saw girls and women who were really hard physical workers, probably not too far removed from our own grandparents, but certainly not something very common in my generation. In the physical sense, you know, carrying big bushels of sticks and firewood, 20-kilo bags of rice times 3 on your backs. It's, you know, big bags and sacks of potatoes and things. It was nothing to these women, and it was expected and it looked effortless. For me, I very much struggled. The time we visited was the year that Chinatown burnt down in Honiara, and the Australian Army was very present, but for the first time when you travel to these countries, I was very well looked after and I felt very safe, considering what was happening around us. And it was that experience that made me want to learn more about everything. Since that first initial visit in 2006, I've been back about 7 times, and each time I learned more about the Malaysian culture and language, and I connect more and more with family. and I've taken a real interest in the genealogy of my family. What I have begun to appreciate are the stories that are passed down from person to person through each generation, and this is an interest that started for me in Mackay with my grandfather. Perhaps a real impact on me personally were the observations I made of the experiences of girls and women at this time in the Solomons, which actually led to me completing my doctorate. And now that I have a daughter, passing on information that will help her connect with her Malayan heritage is important to me. Along the way, I've had a very steep learning curve in culture, especially as a girl, as a woman, going back. But there is some advice, you know, if you're interested in connecting back with your families, that I'd like to leave you with. Always do your research, because sometimes you can get disappointed with where the avenues lead. Use your most accessible resources that are already available. You know, for me, it's the elders in your community. That's a good place to start. Academics like Clive, who have done a lot of genealogy over the years. And perhaps the icing on the cake for me and my Malaysian experience is being able to give back because of all the benefits and the advantages I've had been growing up in Australia. Sorry. I'm very proud of my Australian South Sea Island heritage, and I'm proud that we can commemorate and recognise what has unfolded over the past 150 years. I think it's important. And I think it's important that we let our children know where they come from, because a lot of them have grown up not knowing anything.
Many people attend conferences to get something out of it, to take something away, and that's really important. However, in order to take something away from this conference, we must first be willing to actually give. An important reason for this conference is to share your wisdom, experiences, thoughts, opinions and ideas as we continue to move forward. By sharing, we will connect and bond together. Therefore, in order to share, I believe our thinking should be this: what can I offer? What can my organisation do? And what can we do collectively together?
It's about the opportunity to come together, and I believe it needs to happen on an annual basis every year, so people can share but also keep the momentum going and build on the good work that's done in the states and in the regions and in the organisations. I believe as Australian South Sea Islanders, unless we then come together, get our act together, and come together in unity, only then can we start talking about things such as an apology.
As any political agenda, you have differences of opinion. The Australian government has differences of opinion, and it's really important that we create a national representation that assists our community groups in putting forward their agendas, and it's important that we have delegates that represent those regional and remote community groups. So yes, we have differences of opinion, we have discourse within our communities, but having a national voice will help to consolidate those differences. We're all here because we want something to move forward. So it's healthy debate and it's passionate debate. So we're passionate about how we represent our communities.
We want to know that when we talk about policy and what decisions should be made, we do it in consultation with South Sea Islanders in Australia, which is why we're looking forward to this body to advise us. The history of blackbirding caused huge disruption in Vanuatu and Solomons. It's something that's really affected our history, and we've gained from it, we've also lost from it, but I think we need to make sure that we engage with the community here to find a common way that's going to help us all move forward.